Hey friend, are you asking yourself, is this what I really want to be doing with my life? I don't think so. I think there's something else that I'm meant to be doing. Welcome to the Painting Your Path podcast, where we have real conversations about what it takes to step out, be bold, and do you. I'm your host, Clarissa Castillo-Ramsey. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Clarissa Castillo-Ramsey. Happy May 1st. And before we get into today's episode, I just want to share a couple of upcoming events with you. The first one is happening virtually on Zoom, May 9th. It's my monthly Artful RX. And basically, it's a paint along with me session. And that's happening at 4 p.m. Pacific time. You can find out more in the show notes. And then on Saturday, May 10th, I'll be hosting an in-person intuitive watercolor session at the Zula Den from 2 to 4 p.m. And details for that are also in the show notes. And by the way, these are 2 free events. And the last event that I'll be having in May is a 3-day creative reset happening May 20th through 22nd. So if you've been wanting to get back to your creative self or curious about exploring your creative path, or maybe even just feeling a little stuck somewhere in life, come join me and just feel into the power of painting. And that's also free. I'm going to have more details on that, but save the date if that sounds exciting to you. And in this episode, I sit down with the incredible Melissa Monte, host of the award-winning Mind Love podcast. After enduring some of life's most challenging experiences, including sexual assault, addiction, loss, and even time in jail for a crime she didn't commit, Melissa has transformed her struggles into guideposts for personal growth. Her journey is nothing short of inspiring. And in our conversation, we'll dive deep into the messy middle, the messy part of life we often don't talk about. Melissa shares how she rebuilt her life after unimaginable hardships, and how even the strongest foundations can be tested and strengthened. Melissa also talks about the current messy middle she's in. She opens up about navigating challenges with the tools she's gained along the way, offering us powerful insights into how to realign when life feels overwhelming. Melissa also has a special gift for our listeners, so tune in to learn more about that. And without further ado, welcome Melissa Monte. Melissa, it is so good to have you on the Painting Your Path podcast.
I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, this season is all about messy middles, and you have such a phenomenal story that I would love for you to just share with our audience a little bit about your journey.
Oh, I had the messiest middle of all time. So I grew up with a pretty good life, other than divorced parents, but I had a stepdad who loved me and all that. And then in high school, several traumas hit me back to back. I was sexually assaulted. A close friend died by suicide, and then my dad died my first year of college. And so that all happened within about a 2-year period. And I just was not equipped to handle any of that. And so my idea of strength was just sort of trying to bypass it as much as I could. I remember actually feeling judgmental over the people that would let their traumas bring them down. I was like, oh, they must be weak. That was my
Yeah.
self-protection mechanism now that I think about it. But
I
I
can relate.
I didn't give
Yeah.
myself an option to feel it. And so my dad died my first year in college, and I was partying every single night. There was a whiteboard in my dorm, and people were tallying all the nights I went out without taking a break. And I got to like 75. So I was just
Wow.
drinking.
Well,
And
yeah.
I had a pretty epic downward spiral. I ended up becoming really severely bulimic, and I couldn't see that I was downward spiraling. I thought I was living my best life, but
Right.
that best life meant not feeling anything at all. It meant just having fun, just doing. And so it kept getting worse without me seeing it. I ended up getting a good job, so I thought I was doing well. And then I got into a relationship, and I couldn't see all the red flags because I was making so many excuses for myself that I was also making excuses for him. And so it took a long time to see the truth of what this relationship was, but it was a slow burn. Like I was little things were leaking out. For example, the first thing I found out he was cheating on me. But to me, this felt like a hit to my worth. Like I needed to prove myself or win him in order to feel worthy, worthier than the other person, or to compete in a way. And his dad died the weekend that I met him. And so I was making so many excuses, determined to love him in the way that I felt people didn't understand me when I was going through pain. And so I was making a lot of excuses for his behavior. And I eventually found out he still lived with his mom, even though we were staying at resorts all the time. He gave me this diamond necklace on our first date. He was just
Wow.
showering me with gifts and luxury. And I thought it was someone that could finally sweep me out of my life and into his. And then one day we were on our way to lunch, and we I saw the lights flashing behind us, like a cop car was following us, and I thought maybe we were being pulled over for busted taillights, or I don't know, maybe rolling through a stop sign. But we they pulled us out of the car so they could search it. And I'll never forget the look on this officer's face when he opened the trunk and he found dozens of lock boxes, cases of stolen jewelry. And I found out later on, turned out his jewelry business that I thought he had was actually stealing it from houses that were for sale and easier to get into. And so he had actually used to do loans with his dad. So he had all the MLS reports like, oh, these people don't live there anymore, or oh, they work 9 to 5, so that realtors would know when they could go in. And there's usually a lockbox hanging from the door. And he drove a Benz and dressed nice, so nobody ever thought he was suspicious. And he would just clip the lockboxes, bring it to his Benz, and get a screwdriver, and then the key would fall out, and he would just walk in with the key, walk out with the jewelry. And so he started getting sloppy when his meth addiction got worse, which was something I found out later on too. And he was inviting this dealer in to take the TVs. And so I got caught up in this. I was gone for a month trying to rebuild my life. I went to Hawaii to visit a friend and came back and was just back in his turmoil, and soon arrested after that. And it was a wake up call. I remember sitting in that jail cell, and I was so stressed out. Like I felt like I was going to have a panic attack, but it wasn't because my life was completely unraveling or that I was facing felony charges. It was because I couldn't find somewhere private enough to purge my jail food. And that was my wake up call, because I remember sitting there,
Yeah.
it was like cognitive dissonance. Like I was standing outside of myself, like, what is wrong with you? This is what you're worried about right now. You don't even know if you're going to get out of here, you know?
Yes.
And so from then I moved away. I moved to LA to try to rebuild my life. And it was a long, messy situation. I had to go to court every month. The court date kept getting pushed back. And he told me, or his attorney basically said that if I didn't take a deal, then he was guaranteed to get 10 years in jail because our cases were together. So if one of us fought the charges, we both had to go to trial. And I couldn't do that to somebody, which is so
Yeah.
ridiculous now. Looking back,
Yeah.
it was like I was prioritizing valuing his life over mine. And so I could have proven my innocence because the little key pieces they had against me were actually when I was in Hawaii, but I didn't take that route. I took the felony instead, and I moved to LA, and he only got 2 strikes and time served because he went to rehab. So he followed me. He He lived in a sober living facility right down the street. He threw a brick through my windshield and broke into my house and all sorts of stuff. But then he ended up getting arrested for another string of robberies. And at that moment, it was like I felt this energetic freedom that I couldn't feel even when I was trying to rebuild when he was still free. And so I was determined to get my life back. And it felt like everything was ruined. Like it was something I couldn't press the reset button on. But that's really been my work from there is a whole lot of learning and then eventually being inspired to share what I had spent so long learning.
Gosh, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I have similar parallels of being with somebody who was not a good match, almost got married, and didn't happen. But yeah, so I can relate to that. Just having that wake up call. And you have just done so much with your work, your life. How did you begin? And you've had those moments where you're like, what the hell am I doing? How did you start to change your patterns?
I remember sitting in my new LA apartment, the first place that I lived, and I didn't have a job yet. But I started to find, I was actually on Craigslist all the time, finding little side jobs to do. And so I was like cleaning people's houses and then doing something different the next day. But when I wasn't hustling and finding any way to make money and to prove myself to me, really, I started to learn internet marketing and I was like deep in the black hat forums and I was trying to understand any way to make money online because there was this glaring idea in my head that how was I going to apply for a normal job and write my crazy story on 2 lines of a job application? That just felt
Right.
humiliating, especially because I didn't grow up. I grew up in a middle class household, but everyone was doing fine. My stepdad was actually a police officer. No one had there wasn't a lot of criminal activity going on and I was an honors student. I always thought like I had been told like you're going to really be something when you grow up and all of a sudden it felt like everything was wiped clean and that was all taken from me. And so I had to ask myself like how can I make money with no one else's permission? How can I do this on my own without somebody else looking at me and deciding if I'm worthy? And so I started to learn internet marketing and I ended up winning somehow I answered some question online and I got free tickets to Traffic and Conversion Summit by Ryan Dice, which is huge now, but this was the first year it was happening. It was in Austin. One of my best friends lived there. So I got free tickets and I went and stayed with my friend. And then there was a wicked smart competition at the end. Any internet marketing secret you had, and everyone there had money and I didn't. And so everything I was doing was trying to like hack the system. Weird
Yes.
things like scraping people's phone numbers from Facebook and sending mass text messages through Google Voice, like whatever I could do. And I won that contest. I actually tied with somebody who I happened to know, the only person at this conference that I knew. And I ended up winning a free MacBook Pro. And also, it set up my freelance career for the next couple of years. People were lined up to talk to me. And so that was helpful. I ended up still getting a job with a startup. It was also an interesting situation. I was at a club. This guy was looking through the app, or I was looking through the app store because I was obsessed with apps. And he's like, "Did somebody tell you what I do?" And apparently he had an app company. We ended up going to lunch the next day. He hired me, and I went from their social media manager to I ended up working my way up to vice president. And so I've always just sort of found a path. I've been that kind of person. But what I couldn't find was something that felt really fulfilling. And so even while I was working for this startup that had an ocean view and a stocked fridge and an Equinox membership perk, I was not happy. And I started to really look into books about finding your purpose and listening to more podcasts. And I got back into like listening to Pat Flynn and Smart Passive
Yes.
Income and all of these things. And so I decided that I needed to start something on the side. And so at first I was chasing the money. I was like, okay, well, I could have a t-shirt business, or I was looking at expired domains to find domains with buyer's intent, like gifts for blank. And we ended up working on a site called Gifts for Teen Boys until I realized I don't even think I know a teen boy right now. Like, why am I doing this? And so then I decided to actually get really clear on like, what am I good at? What do I love doing?
Yes.
Where do those things intersect? What have I liked about past jobs? What did I not like about past jobs? And actually writing everything down instead of just assuming I was going to absorb the content by reading or listening. And so that was a really big step in my path because I could actually see patterns instead of having everything swirling in my head. And that's what led me to a podcast. Because one of the questions I asked myself was, well, what medium am I going to share this information? First, it was the topic, and it was, okay, what's in my Audible account? What am I endlessly curious about? What am I always learning no matter what I'm doing in my life? And it was all the power of the mind. And then it was like, what medium? And I could talk myself out of being on video. I got in my head too much when writing a lot of the times. And so I was like, well, I could speak. I've always been good with speaking. And I also saw that a big goal of mine was to be a public speaker. And so I thought, how can I get better at that without anyone else's permission? And how can I practice speaking? And so I decided to start a podcast. And the very next day, Pat Flynn announced his podcast course. And so I knew I was going to jump on it, but there was two options. It was like $500 to get the course, or $3,000 to go spend 2 days with him and he teaches you in person. Well, I know how it works when people are starting businesses and starting their next launch. They are looking for the star students to then feature afterwards. And so I took out a new credit card, maxed it out for this $3,000 program so I could go get to know Pat Flynn, because I thought if I do really well and if I grow or something happens, maybe he'll invite me on his show. And that's exactly what happened. And I was also, I definitely had a bunch of had my marketing mindset on when I launched my show. And so I ended up growing it to 1 million downloads that first year. It was one of my biggest years
That's amazing.
of podcasting. And so, yeah, it was a lot of flailing. That story I just told you took about 10 years.
Yeah. And how, as you were talking, and I just didn't want to interrupt you, but I think like how we're brought up, society can just get so in our head. And I can hear the determination in you to say, okay, I don't need anybody's permission. How did you get to that point? Or was that always just a part of who you are?
My husband laughs because he says my personality doesn't make sense. Like, I'll be the first to raise my hand at a conference of 2,000 people and like not know what it's for, and I end up dancing on stage and I'm just fine. But then like there's like a gotta like call my mom to tell her I'm gonna be late, and I like freeze up and make him do it. So I've always had a level of audacity. Looking back, it stems from a number of things. I was an only child of divorced parents, and I had to go back and forth, and I just felt kind of on my own. My mom got remarried when I was 7, but they were together since I was 4. And she once told me that God comes first, marriage comes second, kids come third. I think she was annoyed with me, but that was like a knife. And I remember just feeling alone. And so I've always felt alone. And now it's actually, I'm healing that quite a bit through starting my own family and having a marriage, but it's not my default way of being. I feel like I'm kind of like alone in this world. Also, when my dad he always had these little entrepreneur ventures that he was bringing to my mom or whatever, even though they were divorced, and like saying, this is what I'm working on next. And none of it ever materialized. And I think there's a big part of me who feels like I need to do this for him, and not necessarily for him, but to prove that we can do it, you know?
Uh-huh.
And my dad had a very, very, very hard life, like trauma that most people can't even imagine. He did the best he could with all that. And so when he died, it was another one of those things of feeling alone because I was an only child and he didn't have a partner, and so it felt like the grief was on me. And that it was part of why I didn't feel understood. But now when I look back, I wonder if he's the only person who would have really understood me. And so it's like with I feel like I'm going to choke up right now. I don't think I've ever really put this together, but with every new leap that I'm taking, it's like I feel him right with me, you know?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And Melissa, I know that in when you submitted to be on the show, you talked about this past September, life hit you hard again. Can you share a little bit about that and being in that messy middle?
Yeah. So, um, in 2020, my husband and I moved to from LA to Big Bear, a little mountain town. Part of because the world shut down and it made no sense to live in LA anymore, but
Yeah.
also because we found out we are pregnant, which I have to thank the pandemic for also because I said we'll do it in 5 years when I was 30, and then it was coming up and I was not ready. But then we ran out of puzzles and the world was shut down and we're like, let's try. So we had our first baby. And then I had another one exactly 2 years later. They had the exact same due date. And then accidentally, all of a sudden, 2 years later, well, it was about a year later, I found out I was pregnant again. And I had the same due date for the third time, which is wild.
Sh-
Like the odds that that's even possible.
I've never heard that.
Like I don't even
I've
think you
never
planned
heard
that. And so
that.
it felt like this was so meant to be. And at about 7.5 weeks, I ended up having a miscarriage over the summer. But then 2 weeks later, I got pregnant again. And so that was actually really hard for me. I, for some reason, just thought I was invincible with that. You know, every time I tried to get pregnant, I got pregnant on the first try, healthy babies. And so that miscarriage really took me by surprise. But then I got pregnant 2 weeks later and everything was going well. I was about 12 weeks and I was planning a retreat up in Big Bear and and then all of a sudden fires rolled into our town and I was getting really nervous because my retreat was supposed to be up here. Finally, my husband's like, I think we're going to have to move. We're going to have to cancel the retreat. And I was like, I'm not canceling. Like at this point, I've already spent the money on all the things.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I like can't cancel this. We need to move it. So I was
Yes.
trying to move it to Palm Springs. Mind you, my husband deals with something called cluster headaches, and they should not be called headaches at all because it's a whole different like neural mechanism. But if you look it up, it's known to be the worst pain known to medicine. And so people that have been shot or had babies, they all say cluster headaches are much worse. And they're called clusters because they come in every like over a series of time and then they'll happen every day in a cluster. And so it was about every year and a half for him, but then he started microdosing mushrooms and it extended it and we thought maybe they wouldn't come back at all because we'd read about that. Well, and then
Yes.
coming back, and that was already emotional. It came back after 3 years, so it did extend the time, but that was already emotional because he's realizing, oh man, I thought maybe these would be gone forever. But like when he's going through them, he's like when a cluster comes on, it lasts about an hour to an hour and a half, and he'll be on the ground like clawing at his eyes. They're called suicide headaches. People will hit their heads against the wall to pass out just to escape from the pain. And so whenever those come around, it's to me it feels like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like I'll go back to jail over and over again if I can save him from that. And it's really difficult with children because you got to keep the children away because it's very scary for them to watch. And so that's happening all of a sudden. Now we're looking at potentially evacuating. I'm supposed to find out the gender of my baby the next day. And I was trying to cancel the appointment. I couldn't. And it was just so weird. I found myself just going to the appointment. My appointment was in LA. I had to get up at 3 in the morning to do this. Could not figure out how my one foot was going in front of the other. But it was like this was what was happening. And so I got down there and I remember actually texting my husband, I think things are going to be looking up for us. Like I end up having time to go get breakfast at my favorite spot and all this stuff. And then I go to the appointment. And I get my ultrasound, so excited to find out the birth of the baby or the gender of the baby. And instead, she just sort of coldly tells me, oh, yeah, there's no heartbeat. And mind you, like, I looked 6 months pregnant, even though I was only 12 weeks because it was my third baby. Like, it was a big bump. I had like all maternity clothes for my retreat. And so I had to go back up the mountain, now just devastated. As I'm driving up, I'm realizing how bad the fires are. Like, we need to evacuate immediately. I am calling my mom on the way. She has to drive from Arizona to pick up my kids. I have to get a DNC the next morning. It's the only time they can get me in. Otherwise, I could be miscarrying while I am at my retreat. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I still did the retreat. I moved it to Palm Springs in a 3-day period of time. My husband's like, it was just
You're
chaos.
amazing.
I had to stay at a friend's house, like in her basement, like to get the DNC. It was just wild. And it was so interesting going through all that, having done as much work on myself as I have now. Yes, it was devastating and it felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest. But I also had this really profound curiosity as to who I was going to be at the end of this because it wasn't my first tumultuous crash, you know? It was like my fourth by this time. Like there's some
Yeah.
other stuff that happened too. Not quite as sad, but like where all of a sudden like my landlord sold our place when I crashed my car and my company shut down all in a 2-week period. Like that happened, but that led me to my husband. I ended up going to a Christmas party that week and I met my husband. And so I'm like, you know, there's always gold at the end of this.
That's
I'm on my
right.
path because of what I had gone through before. I met my husband because of what I've gone through before. What is in this for me? And and I'm still finding that out, honestly, because it was so recent. But it's interesting because I thought I would try again in January was my plan. And right now I'm just really enjoying having my body back. I've had some keynote speeches that then I'm just feeling kind of fired up with my purpose right now. And so I feel intuitively that it's not the right time. I don't know if that means I'm not going to try again. I kind of like staying in the moment. Tuning into my own inner guidance is so important to me because I couldn't feel it for so long. I had spent so long disconnecting from my body. And so that was a big part of my healing process was really feeling myself again, starting from when I'm hungry and full and overcoming an eating disorder, but then also like now I have radar when I'm being gaslit, when I'm being lied to, like I will know before anybody else knows. And so there's always something, but I think the way I view life is that our paths are already predetermined, but there's infinite layers of parallel dimensions of that. And it's usually when you go to the depths of that pain that you pop out on a higher timeline. And so
Yes.
that's how I view it. That's what helps me. That's what helps me lead with more curiosity rather than why is this happening for me? Just really curious as to what this is leading me toward.
Thank you so much. And I agree. It's those challenging, trying times that really help us become who we are. Almost 2 years ago, I got diagnosed with spasmodic dysphonia. I could not even talk. Yet I have a podcast. I'm a coach. I have to use my voice all the time. And it stopped me for a long time. And now it really has informed me so much about who I am, what I really want to do at this point in my life. So I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you've said. And you talk a lot about the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that.
I was raised in a religion that never felt um, inspiring to me. It was more of a set of rules and a way of being with a lot of questions. And so I am not the kind of person who can hear things that don't align and just accept it or make excuses for it. I'm like, but why? You know, like,
Yeah,
why is this
right.
portrayed here? And so for when I was dealing with the loss of my dad, there was a period of time where I was just like, there's no God, this is dumb. And at the time I was in world religions in college and sort of
I took that class too.
things cracked open. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
so I thought this was an original Bible story, but it's actually the Epic of Gilgamesh, you know, all these things. And so I was just like, oh, it's all BS then. But as I kept growing, I couldn't shake the sense that there was something bigger. And the more aligned I was, the more I felt that. And so I decided to explore that. And I got really into just different modes of spirituality. But something has always drawn me back to the Bible. And it wasn't necessarily because I was like, oh no, this is where the truth is. It was like, I gotta figure that out. Like there's
Yeah.
something there. And so I went back as an adult and started to read the Bible and I was horrified. I was like, wow, literally every page is God just telling people to murder each other, like stoning to death this guy for collecting sticks on the Sabbath, and so I was just trying to figure all that out. Meanwhile, I'm also diving into like Hinduism and Ram Dass and all of these things. And so I've always just had this like intention. Like when I sit to pray or meditate, I've always just had this idea of like, I need to find the truth. And so I got really obsessed with finding the truth and finding alignment. And I got really interested in how the Gnostic Gospels, the books that were not included in the Bible, how they seemed so aligned with what I was learning in Eastern philosophy. And so I wondered because I'm like, okay, if these aren't made up, they're still ancient. Where'd they come from? And do they fill some of the holes in my mind? So, long story short, I ended up really studying biblical history. I've probably read like 40 books on it at this point. Um, I ended up buying different versions, getting apps where you could actually see the translation to see what original things did. And I've just gone really deep. It still fascinates me to this day. I'm currently reading 3 books on it. So like I'm always diving into it. And what I found though is my beliefs. Jesus was very aligned with how I view life. And so often when it comes to even secret societies, it's like you get in and there's the surface level teachings, and then you go deeper, and then you go deeper, and then you go deeper, and then they unlock the wisdom. And I could see that in understanding how Jesus moved. He had his 12 disciples that learned something very different from when he was doing the Sermon on the Mount, and you can see that in how he says things. But Jesus was ultimately anti-institution. He was speaking against, I mean, he did say keep the laws and all, but he was speaking against basically losing your heart through the process. Like, okay,
Yes.
yeah, the law says not to touch a sickly person, but now you're walking by somebody who needs your help, basically. And the deeper I go with that, the more fascinating it is. The secret book of Mark, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas is my favorite. They all show a whole different side to what was going on in those times. And then what happened is that the Romans used to persecute the Christians, but then we had somebody in power, Constantine, who ended up adopting the religion. But at that time, they did what was possible for a mass printing of Bibles, which was getting about 50 scribes to which were all under his rule. And so that's when a big part of the narrative started to be shaped. And then the Council of Nicaea started choosing which books were to belong. And so the Romans needed historical legitimacy for their reign. And so they needed a religion, and they took Christianity and they shaped Christianity to what they wanted it to be while killing all of the original Christians, the ones who actually followed Jesus' teachings. And so I believe that Christianity today is not at all what Jesus was teaching it to be. And if you actually go deeper into what the Bible is saying and you stop, because Christian literalism didn't even exist until 300 years after Jesus died. No one was taking it literal. Stories are meant to unlock something within us. We're each supposed to take our own meaning from it, which is why we're all on these different paths. And if you look at the
Yes.
Bible through that lens, outside of some of the things like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, where they really start getting into the laws there, it's beautiful. Like in the beginning was the Word. Yogananda talks about the Word being intelligent meaning plus vibration, or an intelligent vibration plus meaning. That is word. That was the basis of the first part of our creation. And when you really understand what these teachings are, you realize that all of the power is within you. Everything that you need is within you. You are
Yes.
the creator of your own life on such a deeper level than most people ever allow themselves to understand. And if you let yourself tap into the magic just a little bit, it meets you there.
Oh, beautiful. Beautifully said. Yes. And, you have gone through so much in your life, and you also talk a lot about how limitations are our guideposts. And you've shared your story. Is there anything else, any practical tools for our folks who are listening that are kind of stuck in their messy middle right now to help them move forward?
Yeah, limitations as guideposts. We've all heard what's in this for me instead of why is this happening to me? But really lean into that, because what we often do is we're like, yeah, what's in this for me, while we're still resisting whatever chains we're feeling. If you stop resisting, you'll have so much energy to just move forward to the place that you're being guided. And so focus on what you do know. And you don't have to have the big picture of anything, really. You have to just focus on what you know. It could be like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. I just know I don't want to do this. Or I know I like talking to people. That's it. Lean more into that. Start talking to people at the post office. Start talking to people in line.
Right.
Start reaching out to old friends. Start joining networking groups. Like, really go hard on that one thing you know about talking to people. And I promise you, the next step will reveal itself. But instead, what most people do is like, I know I only like talking to people and I don't like any of this. And they're so focused on what they don't want or how they're confused. And they just keep telling themselves they're confused. Stop. What you focus on expands. You can acknowledge that you're confused and then let it go and then focus on what you know. And that's what builds the trust, not just in the universe, because you will see that kind of magic that meets you there when you go hard on the things that you know, but also in yourself. And that's a big thing. So many people have these dreams, or they're like, yeah, I'll do it one day, and then they don't do it. And they think they're just putting it off, but you're never putting it off. You're actually building the self-belief that you're not the kind of person to take action, and you're taking a step back. So every day, every moment that you don't follow your inner nudges, you're taking a step back, you're getting further away, you're developing the muscle that you can't. And so that's what I mean by using your limitations as guideposts. You can be surrounded by walls, but you know where the door is, and walk through the door instead of banging your head into the wall over and over again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that is so true. And I think a lot of people don't put that together, that the repeated, I can't do this or whatever it is just creating that case. And you'll find the evidence for that if you keep looking for it. And the reverse is also true. Like you said, like start focusing on what brings you joy, what really matters, what are you good at? And if you don't know, ask your trusted loved ones who do know you well. They'll tell you. Um, yeah, Melissa, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we move into rapid fire questions?
Sure. You are always creating your life, even when you don't realize it. I think a lot of us in the self-development world, we come across our power by reading The Secret or following some manifesting accounts online or something like that. And we're like, oh my God, I've got this magical power to manifest my life. But then we treat it like it's optional, like it's something that we can put down when we're not ready to use it. Like, go, I'll manifest on Mondays and the rest of the days I'll wing it. But that's not how it works. You don't get to opt out. Every thought, every belief, every action is creating your reality. It's creating what you believe to be possible for yourself, what you believe to be possible in this world. And so you have to realize that, because all of these things like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, that's creating. All of these things like, oh, I'm not capable of that, that's creating. You're always creating your life. And the moment you realize that, you'll be a lot less lenient with your thoughts, because you'll realize, oh, that's a thought poison. Let's work with that. Let's move it. It's not always about bypassing it or pretending it doesn't exist, but saying like, what is that? Challenge it.
Yes.
Don't let it guide your life. Let it inform your life. And so that's what I would love to leave everyone with. If I died and the one message people took from me was that they are creating at every single moment, whether they realize it or not, that would be it.
Amen. And that's what this podcast is all about, is creating life on your terms. And you do have the power to do it. So thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to transition us into what I just call rapid fire questions so the audience can get to know you even more. Melissa, I'm curious, do you have a word or phrase of the year?
A word or phrase of the year? I do. For 4 years it was expansion. And then to this year, I finally switched to resonance. And what that means to me is it's more of a way of being. It's less about the striving and realizing that everything is coming from the inside out, aligning with opportunities. But it also just is a constant reminder of how do I want to feel in this moment? Because sometimes we get so caught up in our goals that we don't realize when we've lost track. And so, yeah, the resonance is really what's in it for me this year.
Beautiful. How about a current obsession?
Oh, I always have a current obsession. I am known as the rabbit hole girl. So like, hmm, right now, what was I just recently going down the rabbit hole of? Um, you know, right now I think it's actually um it might still just be the ancient wisdom. I've got some books right here.
Ace, I love it. The ancient wisdom. And that was going to be my next question, a book or a podcast that you're diving deep into.
Oh, well, the one that I am loving, but it might be too dense for people, is The Second Coming of Christ. It's the commentary on the original teachings of Jesus by Paramahamsa Yogananda, who wrote Audio Biography of a Yogi, but it is fascinating. But if you want one that if you're new to this exploration, my favorite intro to it is Original Sin is a Lie by Bob Peck.
Thanks so much. How about a bucket list vacation spot?
Bali. I can't believe I haven't gone to Bali yet.
Bali. I haven't been there either. That's on my list too. Oh,
And Greece. Bali and Greece are my top two.
oh yeah, Greece is gorgeous. And the last question in the rapid fire is something that you're super excited about for this year, 2025.
So many things. I am excited to get on more stages this year. I'm excited to turn Mind Love into a nonprofit, and I'm excited to get started on my book.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So many good things. And Melissa, I think you have a free gift for our audience. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things I ever did for myself and my business, was really understanding my personal story and how to tell it in a way that connects with people. Because for a long time it was like I would overshare, I'd be word vomiting, and I started to understand that story is the original tool for change, and it's often the most overlooked. And especially nowadays with all of these influencers, gosh, even now we're going to have to deal with trying to figure out who's real and who's not with the wave of AI.
Right.
It's only going to get crazier. And
Yeah.
so that personal connection is what keeps us alive. It's how we connect with each other, and it's also how we understand ourselves. And so understanding my story and actually processing it through the strength, how to tell it, how to figure out how to make myself the hero of my own story was helpful just in the, overcoming the story I was stuck in. And also has been so critical for having a podcast and for sharing stages. And so I created an AI tool. I'm actually big into AI, but I created an AI tool that's really exciting because all these people are just giving out PDFs, and I love those too. I have those to give also, but this tool is a short little form like a quiz, and it will email you a really detailed reframe of a part of your story that's been hard to overcome. And so say there's just something that keeps sticking with you, a regret that you have, something that happened to you. You put that in, you put down how you want to feel, a couple of other questions to get to know who you are personally, and it'll email you back about a page and a half helping you reframe that. So you can find that at mindlove.com/story.
We'll have the link in the show notes. And the last question, Melissa, which I ask all my guests, the name of this podcast is Painting Your Path. What does painting your path mean to you?
I just did a fascinating interview with Human Vibration on Instagram, and a phrase that I've adopted from her is we render as we go. And I think our self-creation process is even more magical than people like to see. If you really think about quantum physics and how, something doesn't even take form until there's a witness, all of this stuff. And so I like to keep it lean into the magic, but That's what I picture. I picture myself in the driver's seat, and as I'm going, all of this just void is just being created. And so the more intentional that I am, the clearer I am with my vision, the more likely I am going to paint the exact path that I want rather than just having everyone else painting it for me.
Oh, love it. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, as I ask with every interview, what's your biggest takeaway? Tell me on social media. We have Melissa has given us so much value today, and please take her up on her free gift. I know I'm going to check it out. And until next time, keep painting your path.
Thank you so much for staying till the very end. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend. If you haven't had a chance yet, please write a review and rate the show. I would love to hear your feedback. And I also have a free resource guide for anybody who is asking themselves, am I on the right path for myself now? Or is there something else that I really want to do? Maybe you're in that quandary. Maybe you're wondering what's next. So head over to the show notes and you'll see my Painting Your Path framework guide. Download it and have some fun. Just start exploring. And thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you next week.